Jared Polin, FroKnowsPhoto.com, and this is your user guide for the Canon R50. Now, if you just picked one up, congratulations. If you want to see a review on this camera because you're deciding if it's right for you, there is a link down below in the description. Now, the point of this video is to help you set this camera up how I personally would set it up, show you what all of the buttons do, show you how the menu should be set up, in my opinion, and then let you get out in the world and start shooting. Because we know most people don't read the user guide or user manual anymore. That's why I created this video, so you can more quickly understand your camera, understand your settings, and get started right away. Now, this is going to be a longer video, so if you don't need the most basics of fundamentals like where the battery goes or how to put a lens on or take the lens off, you can skip around because there is a table of contents down below in the description. But the first thing that I want to do is start showing you everything about the outside of the camera. So let's start with showing you where the memory card and battery go before we move on to the rest of the camera. Right here, door. Clip it, it goes open. It goes boingy boing, it's springy spring, springy spring. To close it, you do this, and then you just move that lock just like that. Let's open it back up. You have your battery right here. We can go ahead and push that switch up, and here is your battery. So the battery, it's not the biggest battery in the world because this is a much smaller camera. I always recommend you have at least 2 batteries, one in the camera and one fully charged, so that if something does ever happen or you lose one or some kid throws one out for some odd reason, well, you have a second battery. It's better to have 2 than to have one go bad and you are not able to take pictures. So I'm gonna put the battery in on slight angle, which moves that out of the way, press it down, locks in, clicks in, shut the door, lock it, and you're good to go. But we're gonna leave it open for now because this is where your memory card goes. It's spring loaded. This is your SD card. Remember, do not buy a junky SD card. I mean, when you go on Amazon and there's some no-name thing, and when I say no name, it's not SanDisk, it's not ProGrade, it's not Lexar, it's not Sony. Those are kind of the reputable cards these days, and you wanna buy the best card that you can because the last thing you wanna have happen is a really badly made card fail on you when all of your memories are saved to it. You don't want to cheap out when it comes to the memory card because why spend all the money on this camera, have that amazing trip, only to have your card fail and go bad? So, how do we put it in? Clicks in, shut the door, and that is where your battery goes and where your memory card goes. Now, when you get your camera, the lens will not be on it. It will come in 2 separate pieces if you got the kit. If you got the body only, obviously there's no lens in the box. So let's just imagine that the lens isn't on the camera as of yet. So here's the lens and here's the body. If we look inside of the body, that is your image sensor. You generally don't want to leave this exposed to the elements for any amount of time because if you get dust in there or rain falls on there or you accidentally touch it, you might ruin the image sensor, which will be an expensive repair if they can even repair it. So when I'm changing lenses, I make sure that I tilt the camera down, it's not really windy or it's not raining or there's not a lot of dust around, and I also make sure that the camera is off when I do this. In order to put it on, we've got a red line right there on the lens. We have a red line right there on your mount. You line these 2 up, you turn it away depending on which hand you're holding it with, and you hear the click. Once more, click. It's now locked in and you're ready to go. This isn't something really to be afraid of, but I know when you're first starting out, you might be a little hesitant because you don't want to break your camera. I was the same way when I first started out, but it's real simple. To take it off, you press this button right here. It's a release button for the lens. Turn it the opposite way that you pressed it to go on, and boom, you take it off. So when you switch lenses, that's all you need to do to get your lens on and off the camera. Now let's move to the top of the camera. The first thing we need to do is turn it on. This says off, this says on. Real simple. Flick the switch. When you're not using the camera, turn it off. It's that simple. So we're gonna leave it off right now. This is your mode dial. This allows you to change your shooting modes. Now, I'm gonna wait till we're plugged into the camera so you can see the back of the screen so we can define what each one does, but it's pretty simple. A+ is basically the all auto mode, and that's where your camera is gonna start when you first get it, and then to move out of that, you just rotate it around. And like I said, I'm going to explain each one of these when we get into the menu and the back of the camera. Red button right here, this is your record button when it comes to shooting video. So you can start and stop recording by pressing this button. You have a command dial right here. This is going to change your shutter speed as well as your aperture just by turning it left or turning it right. This is your shutter button. This is what you press halfway down when it comes to autofocus, or to take a picture, you end up pressing it all the way down. This is a tactile thing, so you really need to feel it. Just press it halfway down. You feel it's a little springy, and then you press it fully down. Yeah, you'll get a hang of this one really quick. This dedicated button is for your ISO. That's how you change the sensitivity of light that your sensor is going to gather. You press that, and you'll be able to change your ISO really simple. Around the top of the camera, this is your hot shoe. This is where a flash will go, or if you're shooting video, this is where a microphone can also go. It also is a digital hot shoe, meaning Canon makes certain microphones that do not need any wires to plug into the camera. So all you need to do is plug the digital hot shoe into here, and when you're recording audio, it's going right from the microphone right into the camera digitally, so you don't need to have any wires hanging off the side of the camera. These two dots right here, these are microphones. So if you're not plugging in an external mic, this is where the audio will be picked up. You do have a flash built in. You just pop it up like this, and you pop it down like that when you need the flash. Now keep in mind, if you're in a stadium and you're trying to shoot Taylor Swift all the way down there, like, hey Taylor, how are you? And she's like, I can't see you, you're so far away. And those tickets were really expensive. You don't need to pop up the flash in that situation, because all you're gonna really do is light up the person's head 10 feet in front of you. This flash is only good for 8 to 10 feet. So it's for when you're out with your friends, you want to take photos of the people right in front of you, that's good. But if you're at a sporting event or a concert, you really don't need the flash, because they're going to have great light on the stage or great light in the stadium. You don't need to pop the flash at all. There's very few times you're going to use the flash these days, unless it's to take a selfie or a picture of someone right in front of you. Moving around to the back of the camera, the first thing that you're presented with is the electronic viewfinder. This is your window to the world. Basically, what you see through your lens is what you're going to see in here. It's basically a little TV screen, and it shows you all of your settings. It shows you your exposure. It shows you everything that you need to see with your camera. So think of it as a mini screen. Next to it, there is this little sensor. This is a proximity sensor, so I should be able to show you how this works. Now, I could turn on the screen by hitting menu. I just want to show you what's going to happen. This is actually your touch screen right here. You can see it can move through and touch things. But your proximity sensor, let me use this hand, look what happens. It switches to the electronic viewfinder. I move my finger away from it, it's back to the back of the screen. So if you put your face up to the camera, which is just like this, then you can see that it's going to switch to using the electronic viewfinder. That also reminds me, if you're new to photography, I should show you how to hold the camera properly, in my opinion, which is like this. Your right hand, if you have a right hand, goes like this. Your left hand goes underneath the lens. I know you've seen a million people try to shoot like this. That's not how you shoot. This doesn't look good, and it's also a little more rough on your shoulder, and it's not as stable. You take your left hand, you put it underneath the lens. You can use your thumb and forefinger to zoom, but this is how you shoot. You put it up to your eye, and it's more stable. You tuck those elbows in, and you're good to go. You might also think that you could shoot like this, because a lot of people are used to using a cell phone and touching the screen. This is not very stable, and the proper way that photographers shoot is to go like this. You will still see people shooting like this. I don't recommend doing that because it's not as stable, but on the flip side, you do have a flip LCD screen. But the only time I do recommend not using the electronic viewfinder is if you need to go above your head. You just tilt the screen down. That is one of the only times I recommend doing it, because if the subject is right in front of you, put your eye up to the viewfinder. It's a much better experience. It's more stable, and you look more professional when you're doing it. Anyway, back to the back of the camera. So underneath the electronic viewfinder, right here, you have a diopter. So if you wear glasses, now I wear glasses, but I don't shoot photos wearing glasses. I always take them off. But all you need to do to get a sharp screen inside is just hit the menu button so you can see the text, and then move this diopter until it looks nice and sharp for your eye. It's going to be different for everybody, so just get it set for you. But in order to do that, you have this little thing at the bottom. You move it to the right, you move it to the left while you're looking through the camera, and that's going to help you see it nice and sharp in the electronic viewfinder. Continuing on, we already talked about the touchscreen. This is your LCD touchscreen. You can flip it out, you can rotate it, you can reverse it, you can Missy Elliott, yeah, I'm a really good singer, by the way. To the right of the LCD screen, you've got your info button. You have your up, down, left, right, BA, select, start. This is considered your D-pad. You can see there's a bunch of different icons on there. You are able to change those icons in the menu. You can set them to whatever you would like, but generally speaking, they start off in a pretty good place. This top one, which is such a small icon, I can't even tell you what it looks like right now because my eyes aren't great, but when you go ahead and press that and the camera is on, remember how I showed you that this control dial right here changes shutter speed but can also change aperture? Yeah, you're gonna hit this button up and you're gonna watch on the back of the screen as it changes whether you control the shutter speed or the aperture. That's one thing you might be saying, like, if I want to shoot in full manual and I can't control my aperture, how do I change it? Well, that's how you're gonna do it. You would press that button and then it changes what this top dial goes ahead and does. You can change your shooting speed right here when you hit right. When you hit down, that's the Oscar the Grouch button. When you press it, he goes, I'm angry. Oscar, you know, I was Oscar the Grouch once for Halloween as a little kid. And I was probably a grouch when I was a kid. I was definitely a grouch. Steven, do you think I was a grouch?
Yes.
I was absolutely a grouch. And that's why I played Oscar the Grouch, and my mom made a really nice costume. So that's your trash can. Then we have your autofocus and manual. You're most likely going to be in autofocus at all times. You have an info button right here that's going to cycle through different information on the back of the screen. Your play button, as well as your menu button. And then you have these two buttons back here on the top right that you can also activate or turn off, or you could change them to a few different things, and you'll see that in the custom menu setting. But right there, there's some smaller icons. You've got a magnifying glass and you have a checkerboard. That means when you're reviewing your images, you can zoom in or zoom out. So if you ever find yourself saying, I don't know how I had all of these photos, I get 100 photos on the back of the camera and they're really small and I can't see them, what did I do? Well, just know that you can just hit the magnifying glass a couple of times and it's gonna go from 100 images to like 16 to 8 to 4, back to 1, and that's how you cycle through all of that. Flipping it down to the bottom of the camera, you've got your quarter 20. This is where you would go ahead and mount a tripod foot or attach it to a monopod or a tripod. That's where you would screw it in. We already showed you where your battery goes. I mean, that stuff is really simple. Off to the left-hand side of the camera, we've got your microphone input. In case you don't have a digital mic, you would just move this rubber thing out of the way and you plug your microphone right into there. You do not have a headphone jack in this camera, not a terribly big deal right there, but that is where your microphone goes. On the top of the camera, right here on the side, you've got these 3 dots. Those 3 dots, well, that's going to be your speaker for playing back the audio if you want to hear it. I should have told you that a little earlier because we went over the top of the camera there. Now we have the right side of the camera. You have your USB-C for USB-C charging or for transferring files to the computer. I still recommend getting a card reader, or if you use a MacBook and it has a built-in SD card, you can go ahead and change, or an SD card reader, you can send the files to the computer that way. You have an HDMI port here if you want to plug into your TV or use an external recorder. That's where you have that. And now onto the front of the camera. There is not much going on the front of the camera at all. You've got your lens release button right here, which we already showed you, and you have right above the EOS, or to the left of that, there is a little LED light that's going to light up orange to help you focus in lower light situations. And I'm going to show you how to turn that off because it's more of a distraction, like, hey, Taylor, look at me taking a picture of you and distracting you with an orange light. I never use that. It's one of the first things that I turn off in the camera. Now you have these metal loops right here. Metal loop there, metal loop there. that is for your neck strap. So the camera will come with a Canon neck strap so that you can look old school and hang this around your neck. That's one of the options that are out there. There's a lot of newer options as well, but I do recommend that you do have some sort of strap on your camera because you don't want to drop it when you're walking around or you accidentally bump into something. You kind of want it hanging around your neck. But as you become more professional and you use heavier and larger lenses, you may want to look into something like a black rapid strap. That's an option that I've used for many years. Or there's a company called Peak Designs that also has an option for you guys for something different than the traditional neck strap. And that is the outside of the camera. The next thing we're going to do is move into the menu system. Let me jump in here real quick because I want to show you how easy it can be to edit your JPEGs and your RAW files in a matter of seconds with FroPack 4, which are our custom Lightroom presets. So here's all I need to do. With one click, Blue's Clues, C41, it gives it that awesome filmic look. We've got Copper Tone, DeLorean, High C, Kaleidoscope, we've got Mel Brooks, Saltwater Taffy, Thick, Tintype, and Wet Hot American Summer, all from FroPack 4. But I want to show you my all-time favorite, which is in FroPack 1, and it's called Skittles. Check this out. One click, and boom. So look, if you're new to photography, you're not sure how to edit your photos, you need a great starting point, we created 14 custom Lightroom presets that you can check out right now at fronosphoto.com/FroPack4. While you're over there, you can play with the sliders to see the befores and the afters, and if you decide to pick them up right now, they are currently on sale. If you want to save even more and get Skittles from FroPack 1, you can get the Grand Slam bundle that includes FroPack 1, 2, 3, and 4, and you'll save a ton. So that's how easy it is to edit your JPEGs or your RAW files both on the desktop as well as mobile. Now, let's get back to the user guide. Now, before I jump into the menu system, I want to tell you what I have right here. This is an Atomos recorder. What's happening right now is I'm taking the HDMI out. Display of what I'm seeing in the camera is now going to show up right here. Now, what this doesn't allow me to do is use the touch screen. You're going to be able to touch the screen. I can't MC Hammer it, but you can. You can touch it, I can't. This is the best way that I can show you everything that you're going to see and make it easy to do. So, what I said we were going to do is go over the top of the camera. Right now, it's on the A+ mode, which is called the Scene Intelligent Auto. Shoot with settings that suit the scene. Basically, it's full auto. The camera's going to figure out the way that it wants to shoot, whether you're shooting a person for portraits, or you're shooting sports, or you're shooting landscapes, or you're trying to shoot flowers. The camera's going to do a pretty good job figuring out what the settings should be. I should also say, when you're in the full intelligent auto, you do not have the ability to use the entire menu system. It locks a few of them up, but when we switch out to something like P mode, which is program, which is basically full auto, just more professional, because P doesn't stand for professional, by the way. Some people say that, but it doesn't. It stands for program. It's basically full auto, and that's going to unlock all of the menu for you when you want to make some changes. But when you're first starting out, shooting full auto, get to know that and just shoot there until it's holding you back and you want to take more control and you go around the dial. TV is not to watch TV or Netflix or anything along those lines. It's shutter priority. Then we've got aperture priority, where you set the aperture and the camera's going to go ahead and set your shutter speed, your ISO, based off of the aperture that you are setting. Manual, of course it's manual. You set the shutter speed, you set the aperture. You can set your ISO manually if you don't have it set to auto ISO, which is something we're going to show a little later. We've got your movie recording mode. This is the mode you go into when it's time to record movies. Scene mode or creative filters. This is something I would never use. You're not using a cell phone here, right? This is a real camera. You don't need to do these creative filters. You could do creative filters after the fact if you really, really want, but this is not something I would do. I wouldn't shoot in monochrome. I wouldn't shoot with a fisheye effect, or I wouldn't shoot with something that looks like a watercolor painting. That's just childish. It's time to put away childish things. We've got a real camera, unless you really want to do those childish things. Then you can do them. It's your camera. Next around the dial, we've got our special scene mode. Choose a shooting mode for the scene that you're shooting. So you can go in there and say, oh, I want to photograph food, or it's action, or it's landscapes, or they might call it macro, but you're not actually getting macro photos if you're not using a macro lens. That's to help you. When I first started out, I was in running man mode. That was the guy that looked like he was running, or the person that looked like they were running across the top of the dial, that was really for action sports. That's going to help you get a faster shutter speed for the situations where you're going to be photographing sports and might need a faster shutter speed. So you might want to go into scene mode when you're starting out if you don't want to be in that full auto. I guess the progression would be full auto, A+ mode, green, and then maybe scene mode to select your scene, and then you start graduating to aperture priority or shutter priority before you finally settle into manual. Now, don't worry, it took me like 15 years of shooting to get into manual, but that was the film days. You will get there much quicker than I got there because it's much easier nowadays. Next around the dial, we got hybrid auto. Create a digest movie with your stills. I don't even know what that is. I don't even know. That's probably one of the dumbest modes. No, just no. And then that takes us back to the A+ Scene Intelligent Auto mode. Now, when I hit the menu button, you can see that there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 under the red shooting menu mode. Well, when I get into P and I hit the menu, you can now see there's 9. We've unlocked many more features of this camera that you can go in and tweak. The reason Canon does that is because when you're first starting out, you may not need to know what some of these settings are, and you don't need to touch them. Now, to fully unlock it, I'm gonna go ahead and turn the dial all the way to manual because that's where I like to shoot, and you can see that we've got 9 menus that we can go through right here in the red mode. So we're gonna start right now here, which is the red menu. The first thing you encounter is image quality. This is the quality of the image that you're gonna capture. It's gonna default to JPEG large. That's what this is. L stands for large JPEG. As you can see, I'm the raw guy because, you know, my shirt says it. So I am whatever my shirt says. Keep that in mind. So a raw file has more data. It's all of the data that your image sensor and camera is capturing, whereas a JPEG is getting the data and then throwing out bits and pieces of it that it doesn't need so it can compress it and make it smaller. So it's a compressed file. It's a lossy file, meaning if you save over a JPEG when you're done editing it, well, you can't go back and start over again. Whereas a raw file, you can go back to the raw ingredients and mix them any which way you want, today, tomorrow, into the future, because you have the raw file. I can open up raw files from 2003 from my first digital cameras, and I can edit them with today's technology and bring out better things than I could have back then. So I recommend shooting raw as you get better, but maybe when you're starting out, you shoot raw plus JPEG, or you just want to shoot JPEG, that's perfectly fine starting. Just understand that you don't have full control of the image file that you have. Just keep in mind, if you're shooting raw files, you might need something like Adobe Lightroom, and they do offer a subscription for like $9.99 a month that gives you Photoshop and Lightroom so that you can edit and organize and control what you do with your images. Now, normally, you can just touch the back of the screen. You can touch it. As I said before, I can't. So there's the top dial that I'm gonna turn because I'm gonna set that to RAW, and then JPEG, I'm gonna leave on large right now. Then inside of the D-pad, you have the Q button that also says set. Just think of that as your OK button or your enter button, and Q is just a quick way to get to the menus on the back of the screen. So I go ahead and I hit set and OK, and then next we've got still image aspect ratio is 3:2. 3:2 is the size of your image sensor. So when you enlarge an image or you print it, 4:6. 8:12. That is the full sensor that you're capturing there. Now, if you want to make it smaller, which there is no reason why you should, 4:3 is the old TV format. 16:9 is a movie screen format. This is just for stills, remember that. And 1:1 is for a square. Now, people will be like, I post on Instagram with squares, which actually they don't anymore. That used to be the only way you could post on Instagram back in the day when it was new. I recommend staying in 3:2. Now, if you do shoot RAW and you change the image aspect ratio, it's going to retain all of that data, so you can go back and set it to 3:2 in post. But if you shoot JPEG, it's baked in there. So if you shoot in 1:1, you're going to lose the left, you're going to lose the right, and you can never get that information back again. Digital teleconverter is currently off because I'm plugged into HDMI, but what that does is it gives you a 1.4 magnification or a 2x magnification, where if you want to reach out and grab more from a distance, digitally, you can do that. I don't recommend putting that on because you're gonna capture something, and if you miss it, you cut off an arm, you can't get it back. So I recommend not using digital teleconverter because it's digital. You can just punch in later in the computer if you really want to crop. But I'm not a big fan of cropping, I'll just say that now, because remember, the more you crop, the less data and detail and information you have in your file, and you're just going to enlarge the imperfections. Actually, correction, the reason it's blacked out, it's not because I'm plugged into the HDMI, it's because it doesn't work when you shoot RAW. It's only going to do it when you shoot JPEG, and because we're set to RAW and JPEG, you can't use that function. Moving on, you could just touch number 2, you could hit the D-pad to the right, or you could turn the shutter speed dial once to the right, and that's gonna move you through the menu. We've got exposure compensation, which I don't change at all. I leave it set to where it's set. We've got ISO speed settings. This is important. When you first get your camera, it's gonna be set to auto ISO. That's where the camera is going to make all of the ISO choices for you. Ooh, for you, I'm a growing boy. That's right. It's going to make all those choices for you in auto. It's not a bad place to start. The camera does a very good job. Just understand that the ISO could be 100 for one shot, and it could be 6400 for the next shot, and it might be too much, but when you're first starting out, it's not bad. If you want to take control of it, you just go in here and you're just going to be like, well, I want to shoot 100 ISO. Or you could take it all the way up in this mode to 25,600, which we're not gonna wanna do because it's gonna end up looking like Swiss cheese. With this camera, 4,000 ISO is gonna be pushing it quality-wise. You can push it, it's all right, you can do that. Just understand you're gonna get more noise and grain because as you raise the ISO, you're raising the sensitivity of light, which is enlarging those pixels, which means you're gonna see more noise and grain. Hitting the menu, because we're gonna go back, I've now set the ISO speed. Remember, we have an ISO button at the top that we can press that and change ISO if you want to do it. But when you're starting out, just shoot on that auto ISO to get started, just to get you out there and shooting. Max for auto ISO, if you're in auto ISO, you could set the max that, hey, I don't want it to go up to 25,000 or 32,000 ISO, and it's only going to go to 6,400, no higher than that. Going back into the menu, we've got HDR shooting. This is something I personally leave off. It's not really necessary right now. We've got HDR mode is also off. Auto lighting optimizer is off. High tone priority or highlight tone priority is off as well. Most of this stuff is not affecting your RAW file, but it's going to affect the JPEG. The reason I skip past some of this stuff, it's just something that you really don't need to worry about. You don't need to bother yourself with figuring it out because it doesn't really help you, and that's why I personally leave it off. Now, anti-flicker shooting is something that might come in handy. If you're shooting in a gymnasium, because you're photographing your kid or somebody doing something in a gymnasium, do you know how sometimes the lights flicker? The old sodium vapor, the metal halides, they do a bunch of flickering. Well, sometimes you may pick up that in your photos. You might see the light is uneven because you shot during the flick or the and you're getting a little bit of both in the scene. So this, if you enable it, will tell the camera to only shoot when it's or flicker, the flick or the whichever way it is. And so it might slow it down a little bit because it's detecting when the flick is happening and only shooting on the or vice versa. You could leave this on most of the time because if flickering isn't happening, it's not going to affect your shooting ability. Let me jump in here real quick and say, would you like the cliff notes on shooting in low light situations? Well, if you said yes, just look for this orange box over on phronosphoto.com, put your name, email address in it, hit send it, and I'm gonna send you a free guide to capturing motion in low light situations. It's perfect for people just like you. Now moving on to menu number 3, flash control. If you're just starting out, you're not going to take control of your flash, let's just say that. Metering mode, another thing that is almost unnecessary these days because the camera is doing all of the work for you. This is your evaluative meter. That's where I leave it. That's going to take a reading of the brightest and the darkest part of the scene and give you right in the middle for your exposure. But keep in mind that your electronic viewfinder is showing you a live simulation of what your exposure is. And so if it's too bright or too dark, you should know that right off the bat and know which direction to change it by changing your shutter speed, aperture, or your ISO, or if you're in auto, it's basically going to give you the right setting, 99% of the time. Continuing on, you've got partial metering, you've got spot metering, and you've got center weight metering for averaging. I just leave it on evaluative all of the time. Number 4, white balance. it's set to auto. I'm shooting auto white balance because I shoot RAW. I can change it after the fact, right? Because the RAW file has that data. So if it's cloudy or sunny, I can change the white balance after much easier. If you're shooting JPEGs, the white balance is gonna be baked in and it's gonna be a little harder to change after the fact. So if you shoot flash white balance, which is super warm and super yellow, and you do that outside and you're not using flash or you're using it indoors, your image is gonna look totally off color-wise. And so auto white balance, if you're not gonna take control of it, is still a very good spot. The cameras do a great job of it nowadays. Custom white balance, you can set your custom white balance if you're in the studio and you're shooting something that you need to get your color right. You can dial in the color, dial in the light. We've got these lights right here. What are these, 5600, Stephen? Yeah, these are set to 5600 degrees Kelvin, so we lock the white balance into 5600 to match the lighting because we know what it's gonna be and the light isn't gonna change. But if you're worried about it changing, auto white balance, perfectly fine. I use it all the time. White balance shift, never use it. Color space, I leave it set to sRGB. Picture style is currently set to auto. This is one thing that you should pay attention to. I think auto does a good job, but the options that you have, you've got standard, which is gonna be a little flatter. You've got portrait, landscapes. Landscapes is gonna punch it up a little bit more. Fine details is going to maybe sharpen your image more. Now, this is only affecting your JPEG. Remember that. No matter what you do here, the RAW file is going to maintain all of the original data and you can tweak it later. But you've got neutral, you've got faithful, so it won't cheat on you. You've got monochrome. Now, monochrome is going to set your image to black and white. So if you shoot JPEG, you're only going to get monochrome, black and white. You're not getting any of that color information. It's saving the JPEG, throwing the rest of the color data away. Now, if you're shooting RAW and you set it to monochrome, well, it's gonna show up in the preview as monochrome. And when you bring it into the computer, it's gonna show up monochrome as well, but you could also turn it back to color because you maintain all of that color data. I'm a big fan of shooting RAW. Again, I wear it on my shirt because I want you to have all of the information. It's much better to do. Now, it's going to be a larger file. It's going to take up more space on the memory card, but memory cards are cheap and storage is cheap these days. You do need to do a little bit extra work, but I rather have all of the data than less of the data, but that's a personal choice for you. Generally speaking, leaving it in auto is going to do a pretty good job. I should also mention that this is going to take effect when you're shooting video. So if you shoot video in monochrome, it's only going to be black and white. Even you're not shooting raw video, so it's going to be black and white when you bring it into the computer. You want to make sure when you're shooting video that you get it as close as possible to the picture style that you want, because it's much more difficult to change it after the fact. And the last thing I'll say about this is if you over sharpen something in the camera with your JPEG, say you're photographing a wedding or a bride or a groom or whatever, and they're over sharpened because you maxed it out for some reason, you can't unmax it out in the future. So you're better off shooting more of a neutral scene or a flat scene and correcting later than locking it into something that you can't change. So I'm gonna go ahead and leave it on auto. We've got clarity, I leave it set to right here in the middle. We've got shooting creative filters. I leave this off in manual. This is not something that I'm personally gonna use. I guess I could jump in there real quick and just show you what they are. Image processing with creative filters is disabled. You've got images are processed to create grainy black and white images. Are you kidding me? If you ever do this, I'm gonna reach through the camera and punch you in the face. Do not do this. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. Images are processed to look softer. Are you kidding me? Oh my God, never. Fisheye effect, no. Colors that make the subject stand, no, no, no. Get out of here. Miniature effect, no. Yeah, that's not good if you're gonna take pictures of yourself and send it to your friend. You don't wanna miniaturize. That's where you wanna magnify. So I'm gonna go ahead and leave this creative filter to disabled. Number 5, under red. I know this is extensive, but this is we go through this once just to give you an understanding of what this stuff is. Lens aberration correction. Peripheral illumination, this is currently on. You've got distortion correction. Now, a lot of this is dependent upon the lens that you put on. It's already, the lens has information that is talking to the camera, so it knows that I have on there the kit 18 to 150, so you can put distortion aberration correction on if you want. That's going to affect your JPEG file. It's not going to affect your RAW file. So that's up to you to decide whether you want to do that or not. It's not going to hurt to have the distortion correction on because it's digitally correcting your file, which is what the lens is supposed to look like. So you could put that on, you could put it off if you want. Next, we've got digital lens optimizer. It's currently set to standard. I mean, this is another thing that I personally turn off because I don't even know what it's doing. We've got chromatic aberration correction. You can leave that on, and diffraction correction. You could also leave that on if you would like. Back into the menu, long exposure noise reduction. I leave this off. If you're going to be doing a 30-second exposure, you might add more noise and grain to your image the longer the sensor is exposed to light, but I don't worry about it. I leave that off. High ISO speed noise reduction. I'm not a fan of noise reduction added to my images because it ends up making it look smoother. It ends up making it look more like a mosaic the higher ISOs you go, so I don't like this. I don't mind having noise or grain in my images. It's part of photography. That's what we used to do with film. It already had it. I'm not for adding grain. Remember that. That's why I made fun of that grain setting. You don't need to add, no, do not add grain. So I go ahead and I turn this and I disable it. Dust delete data, that's if you had dust on your sensor, you could have it take it out automatically. Digitally, something I never use either. Number 6, we've got focus bracketing is currently disabled. We've got drive mode. So you've got a lot of different modes right here. We've got single shooting. This means every time I press the button once, I'm going to show you, takes a picture, just one picture. Now let's go back into the menu. Drive mode, high speed continuous plus. This is going to take a lot of pictures. You ready? Woo! Woo! Because I'm shooting RAW plus JPEG, I outran the buffer within like 8 pictures. But you should be getting roughly 14 frames a second in some situations, roughly, depending on your shutter speed. Obviously, if it's too slow, you're not gonna get 14 frames a second. But this camera can shoot extremely fast. Just know if you're in RAW and JPEG at the same time, you're only gonna get about like 6, 7, or 8 pictures in a row before you outrun the buffer. If you're just gonna be shooting in JPEG mode, you're pretty much not gonna outrun the buffer. Just know that that's going to take a lot more pictures, but this is the mode you're going to use when you're going to shoot high-speed action. You don't need to do that if the subject is just sitting right in front of you. You've got high-speed continuous without the plus, which is slower, so you're going to probably get half as many shots per second, and then low-speed continuous is super slow altogether. Self-timer 10 seconds, you've got self-timer 2 seconds, and then you've got self-timer continuous shooting, where if I did the self-timer, it would count down, take a picture, count down, take a second picture because it's set to 2. You could set that to, I believe, up to 10 shots, where you could set the timer, and it's gonna take 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 shots in a row for you. So I'm gonna go ahead and leave it on high-speed continuous plus right now because I shoot a lot of fast-moving action. Now, you've got silent shooting function is currently off. I can't change it right now because I'm plugged into the HDMI, but you have the ability to shoot in complete silence. So if you are photographing in a situation where you can't make any noise, you can shoot silent altogether. It's gonna turn off the electronic first curtain shutter, which is what you're hearing, the click, 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 click noise, is that shutter coming down inside of your camera. Now, release shutter without card is not something that I want to do because if we don't have film or a card in the camera, why would we want to be taking pictures? That's something that I turn off automatically. Number 7, image stabilization mode. So you do not have image stabilization inside of the body. There's no IBIS built in, but a lot of the lenses have image stabilization. You can turn that on, and for video, you see how it has a camera next to it, a video camera. That's for digital IS. That's gonna punch in even more to compensate for movement if you're walking around. That's a digital IS. It's cropping your image ever so slightly. We're gonna leave that off right now. We've got your customize your quick controls, which is when you hit the Q button on the back of the camera, it's going to allow you to customize that. We can edit the layout. So you can see it's gonna pull it up and we can deactivate something. Like if I don't wanna change this or this, I could just turn it off and it's no longer gonna show up in that quick menu. Yeah, so let me hit menu to get back out. I'm gonna hit save and exit, and I go ahead and I save and I can go back into my menu. Touch shutter is disabled. I do not want to touch the back of the screen and have it take pictures. I hate it. Image review is something that I turn off as well. Because if you've noticed, if you've practiced and you've taken some pictures, and you take a picture and then it pops up on the back of the screen, that's distracting. I go ahead and I turn this off completely, and the viewfinder, it's disabled in the viewfinder. So if you're using the electronic viewfinder, you're not gonna have that preview come up after you take a picture. Back into the menu, we've got high-speed display. Now this currently isn't active because it says restricted by the following settings or conditions. Drive mode. So it's probably changing the frame rate of the display when I'm in high speed plus. I've never noticed an issue being in this mode, so it doesn't really matter. So it's just deactivating it for you. You've got metering timer. I leave it set to 8 seconds as well. We've got number 8 in the red menu, still an extensive menu. We've got display simulation is currently set to exposure. This is what you're seeing through your electronic viewfinder when you look up to it. You're gonna see the exposure. So if you're in auto, you're most likely just gonna see the right exposure. If you're in a manual mode, you're going to see what your settings are. Like it showed up dark in here. I could just show you actually. So let me show you because we're recording my electronic viewfinder. So you could see how it's super dark right now. It's super dark because all my settings are way off. So if I turn my shutter speed down and I turn my ISO up, I'm hitting the ISO button and I'm dialing that up. Oh, look, it's gathering more light. So now you can see that I'm still off, but I can go down and look. You see that arrow moving on the bottom of the screen? Now it's lined up right in the middle. That is my light meter. So it's telling me that my exposure is now correct by lining it up there. But I'm at 1/6 of a second, which is super slow, and that's why you're getting some of that blurring. Your image might do that as well. Wow, you got a quick lesson in exposure right here. But I just wanted to show you what's happening. Look, if you see this in your camera, you know that picture's not gonna turn out, so you gotta go ahead and make some changes. It's so much easier today than it was yesterday when I was shooting film because we couldn't see it. We had to guess it. Now you have it all right in front of your face showing you this simulation. That was pretty good. I really like that. That's why I like teaching. Let me jump in here real quick and say, would you like to build your very own online portfolio to share your images with your friends, the world, and to be in control of everything on your own page? Well, if you said yes, use Squarespace. I personally have been using it for more than 10 years for my personal website because it's simple, easy, affordable, and I don't need to know any coding. And better yet, you can get a 14-day free trial over at squarespace.com/FroKnowsPhoto. And if you decide that it's for you, use the code FroKnowsPhoto at checkout to get 10% off your first order. Now, let's get back to the video. We've got optical viewfinder simulation. View assist is currently off, so that would brighten it up. I leave that off. Shooting info display is another important one. We've got screen info settings. So look, you have all of these settings that can show up as you toggle through your different info displays. But let's say I don't want this, and I don't want this, and I don't want this. Well, I don't want that to show up on the back of the camera. I can turn them off, and I can hit OK. Now that's for the back of the screen. If you see VF info toggle settings, that's for the settings inside of your viewfinder. We've got viewfinder vertical display is on. That means when you go vertical with shooting, the information is going to show up on the bottom just like it always does and not sideways like we used to have to do when we had our old cameras. Grid display. If you want to have like a checkerboard on your screen when you're shooting, you could turn grid display on. I personally keep it off. Histogram is another way of seeing exposure. It's better to be set to brightness than the other option, which is for color, which I leave that off. And if you're gonna leave it on, display size is probably large. I personally don't use the histogram. Steven's more of a histogram guy. That's Steven back here. I personally don't like to use that myself. Lens info display. Let's see what that means. Focus distance display in manual focus mode. That's great to leave on. And focal length display enabled is great because it shows me what focal length I'm shooting at. I like seeing that just to have that option in my eyeballs. Next, we've got reverse display is on. That's when you flip out your LCD screen and you flip it around, it's automatically going to reverse. So instead of being upside down when you flip it out and rotate it, it's going to automatically flip to display properly. We've got your viewfinder display format. This is for people who wear glasses. Display 1 is the full display, and display 2, shrinking it down ever so slightly if you need to use glasses so that it will show you the entire display. I want it big and vibrant, so I don't wear glasses when I shoot, so I go ahead and I leave it on display 1. Display performance, we have power saving, we also have smooth. You could put it on smooth. It's very Rob Thomas, because Rob Thomas comes out and says, so smooth. Or it's like me, I'm smooth. Either way, you can pick and choose. Number 9, you've got your movie record size. Now, you might be saying, Jared, you're not in movie mode. That's correct, because you can still get access to some movie settings in photo mode. So why we do this is because if you go ahead and you hit the red record button at this time, it's going to record video even if you're in stills mode, so you can go ahead and set that. But when we get into the video mode, there is a separate menu system. It's not as extensive. There's only a few additions, but one of them is being able to get and unlock more movie modes. Sound recording is set to auto. You can always change that to manual, so you can take control of your attenuation, or you could set wind noise reduction. You have that right inside of the camera. You've got ISO speed settings for video. You can change that here. You've got your auto slow shutter. I leave the set to exactly where it's set. Wow, there's auto level. I forgot. They've got auto level in this camera, which is going to help you get your levels a little straighter when you're shooting video. I personally don't use this, so I leave it on disabled. And we've got shutter button function for movies. You can go in and change this where it could be a meter, or it could be servo, which servo AF means your autofocus. So you can go ahead and set that any which way that you would like. And that takes us all the way through the red menu, which is the most extensive menu in the camera. And then moving on, we get into autofocus. Now we're into autofocus. We've got AF operations. You've got one shot, AI focus, and servo. One shot means when you press the button halfway down, you're gonna hear a beep. It's gonna lock focus. Let me, you hear that beep? And my finger is pressed halfway down, it's not gonna shift focus. But we go back into the menu system. Now keep in mind, you can change this on the outside of the camera. I don't have to go into the menu every time I want to change this, because we have the quick menu on the back of the camera, but we're going through it right now. AI focus, this means the camera's going to choose between one shot or servo. Servo is continuous focus. Let me try that again. Servo is continuous focus. That's one word, Jared. So if I press my finger halfway down, it's going to continuously focus. It's going to find what to focus on and focus on it. See, it's always looking to focus right there, as long as my finger is pressed halfway down, and then I would press it fully to go ahead and take a picture. So real simple. This is what you're gonna use for action. Hey, Steven, let me point it at you. Where's Steven? Look at that. There's Steven. It's finding his face because it has lock-on tracking and IAF, which we'll get to in just a minute. So let's get back into the menu setting right here. This continuous autofocus is so good. You're going to use that 99% of the time these days. AF area, you have different options. You could change these on the back of the camera. Whole area AF is the camera's going to make all the decisions for you. It's going to focus on whatever it thinks it should focus on, most likely the closest thing to the camera. Flexible zone AF, 2, 1. You've got expanded AF area a little smaller. You've got 1-point AF if you really want to focus in on one small point, or spot AF is an even smaller point. If there's a point that you want to focus on, you can move the box right there. You have control here. There's a lot of options that you can do, but the whole area AF when you're just starting out is definitely a good place to be. Whole area AF tracking AF is currently on, so that's using for the whole area. That's great. Subject detection. You just saw that it detected Steven as a subject or a human. You've got auto, which is going to switch between people, animals, vehicles, as well as none. So if you want no subject detection, you turn it off. That might come in handy in a very rare situation where you're trying to photograph an object and not the subject. You would turn it off. Most of the time, auto's going to be fine, but if you're just going to be shooting people's good, but you want to make sure that you're not in animals when you're photographing people. Eye detection is enabled. You saw that a few seconds ago where the little blue box showed up around Steven's eye. This is so amazing that when you're doing portraits, it's going to find the subject's eye. It's just fantastic that it's just so powerful, even in a camera like this. You've got focus mode is currently set to autofocus. If you wanted to go to manual, you have AF, or you could change it to MF, but no, Samuel L. Jackson, it doesn't mean that. Moving on, we've got preview AF is enabled. This should be disabled at all times. This should be one of the first things that you turn off, because what is happening here is even if your finger is not pressed halfway down on the shutter button, it's going to just try to find focus nonstop. And that's continually, it's annoying and it's bad. That's something I should have said probably early on, because I don't know why this is active. This should be something that you should have to turn on, not turn off. But if you're wondering why is your camera continually focusing and your finger isn't pressed at all on the button, that's why. So I turn that off. Remember I told you about that AF assist beam, that orange light that comes on? Yeah, this is where you turn it off. So I'm gonna disable it at all times. LED AF assisted beam, no, off, go away. We don't even want you. AF, we've got touch and drag settings. This is really a function you don't need anymore with how great the autofocus is, but if you did turn this on, you could use the back of the screen to help you move the autofocusing points if you want to take control. That's something, if you're going to control your focusing points, it might be good to turn this on and turn on touch to drag. Manual focus peaking settings, you could turn that on if you're shooting manually focused. It's going to show you a red lines around stuff that's in focus. It's going to make it much easier to get focusing on there. Next up, you've got focus guide is currently off, but if you're going to shoot manual, it gets these two triangles that when you get it right, it lines it up in the middle, and then you can fire the torpedo and try to take down the Death Star, because that's what you have. You line it up, boop, 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 and then you fly out of the Death Star and you survive. And then we go on to the next movie. And then the Ewoks cheer. Right, they cheered on Endor, right? I think when it exploded, they cheered on Endor. They're like, rah, 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 rah. That's not what Ewoks made. They were like, rah, 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 rah. Ewoks. I think that's what Ewoks sounded like. Anyway, Movie Servo AF is enabled. You want autofocus for movies. It's tremendous, so you want to leave that on. Number 4, we've got lens electronic manual focus. Leave this off. Focusing control ring, that is your ring on the lens. You can set that to focus currently for the lens that is on right here. It's going to be different depending on what lens you attach to this body. And that takes us through the autofocus menu. Next up, we've got our playback menu. There is pretty much nothing that I do in this menu because I don't protect images, erase images, rotate stills, change or rotate, the ratings, print order. Print order? No. Don't even like that. Creative assist, playback, creative filter, like you could convert a RAW file to a JPEG if you needed to back here, but none of these things, I never touch any of these. Slideshows, don't touch any of this. Image jump, I leave that to 10. Back and forth, playback information display is currently on. AF point display, I like seeing where my autofocus is when I play back. I'll show you that in a second. I leave that on, I put that on enabled. Playback grid is off. You don't need the checkerboard on unless you really wanted. And then the movie playback count, it's just gonna show you record time. I don't do that at all. But let me get into the playback menu because I'll show you what I'm talking about real fast. So now we're looking at my leg because I took like 800 pictures. You could swipe through the camera, you could pinch to zoom. Being that I still can't touch this, I have to hit the arrow key left or right. It is changing. I just took a lot of sequential pictures in a row. Now, if you find that there's info on the screen, we hit the info button, and that's toggling through these different settings. So if you find out like this is on, and you're like, what did I do? You just go ahead and you hit the info button, and it's gonna show you different settings. Most of them we can end up turning off, but you can see all of the info that you have for each image. There's a lot of information. Like this one shows me my shutter speed, my aperture, my ISO, as well as the file number. So real simple. If we want to trash an image, which I don't recommend doing, you go ahead and hit the trash can down. It's going to say cancel or erase image. I don't delete any images from the camera at all because you should have plenty of room because you're getting a card that's either 64 gigs or 128 gigs at this point, maybe even 32 gigs. It's going to be plenty of storage. So you don't really need to worry about deleting it on the camera because you don't want to accidentally delete something that you want to keep. The next menu is the squiggly line one, and it's purple. I love purple. This is where you can set your Wi-Fi and Bluetooth settings. This is how you can connect to a tablet or a cell phone using Canon Connect's app. It's a very powerful app. I'm not going to walk through how to do it because Canon has a very good tutorial that walks you right through how to do this when you download the app, but it's great that you can take control of your camera wirelessly. You can control all of the settings. You can preview it on your phone or your tablet. You can touch for focus. It's great for a creator where your camera's over there set up on a tripod and you can't touch the focus. You can have it lock on and track you. It is tremendous. So get to know these settings. If you're ever going to use this mode, just go ahead and follow the Canon Connect app. Airplane mode is currently off. I don't turn this off when I fly because I'm not using my camera on the airplane, but you could turn that off, which is going to disable all, or if you turn it on, it's going to disable all of the Wi-Fi and Bluetooth settings. There is no GPS in this camera, but if you are connected to a cell phone, you can write some GPS information into the files from here. Error details? I don't even know what error details are. I don't have errors. You have errors. Reset communication settings. We're not doing that. This is really not something we need to do unless you are diving into this menu more extensively. You know who you are if you're going to do that, but these are all the most important settings, and this is really easy to do once you download that Canon Connect app. Let me cut back in here and say, are you looking for a different lens for your Canon camera? Maybe you got it body only, or maybe it came with just one kit lens, but Canon has a whole lineup of what are called RFS lenses, as well as RF lenses that will work perfect for your camera. You have everything from ultra wide angles all the way out to super telephoto zooms. And for more information, there is a link down below in the description and also on the screen right now. Continuing on, we got the wrench mode. We have 5 menus here. We've got select folder. I leave this where it is. File number sequencing. I leave this on continuous, meaning if you take 10 pictures, you take the card out of the camera, and then you put the card back in the camera, it's not going to start back at 1 again. It's going to start at 11. Now, it will go up to 9,999 in a sequence, and then it's going to reset back to 1, and then it's going to change the folder to, instead of folder 101, it's going to go to folder 102. So just understand that you're going to see 9,999 in a sequence, and then it's going to reset back to 0. Format card. This is what, okay, we're going to show you. We're not going to do it, but we're going to go in here. When you put an SD card in the camera, it's always good to format it so that it's talking to the camera in the same language. And so you go ahead and you format it. It wipes it clean. So you don't want to format the card until you've saved and backed up all of your images on a computer or externally. Multiple backups is better than one. If you just save it onto an external hard drive, that's not a backup. If it's not backed up, if that's the only place you have it. A backup is I have it on my desktop, I have it on an external drive, I have it on a card, I have it in the cloud. So just remember, you want to store your files. It's very important because they're digital to have multiple storage options, not just one, because it's not a matter of if something fails, it's when it fails. So you want to make sure you have multiple options and some off-site, which might be cloud-based. So you would go in here and you would just hit OK to format the card. Again, don't do that if you haven't backed up your images. Don't do it. So I'm not doing it now because I haven't backed these up, but I don't want these anyway. Auto rotate. Currently, it's showing us that it's going to rotate the image on the camera as well as on the computer. I don't want it to rotate my vertical images to the horizontal display, meaning it's going to cut back down on the left and the right and show me a smaller display of the vertical. I like turning my camera vertically to see the whole display either in the viewfinder or on the back of the camera. So I want auto rotate only on the computer. Add rotation info is enabled. This is for video. So if you're someone who's a tickety-tocketer and you want to do dance videos or you're shooting for reels or shorts and it's vertical format, you can actually have the file note that you shot vertically so that when you bring it into the computer, it's vertical and you don't have to rotate it. That's a nice feature to have. Date and time zone settings. This is what you want to set, where you want to set the date. We are doing this on Mischief Night, which is actually my grandmother Lil's birthday. She would have been 113 today. She lived to 103 and shy of 7 days. So she's been dead. She died 7 days shy. I know this is a family. She died 7 days shy of her 104th birthday. That was a memory that just popped up. So Lil was 103, almost 104. That just popped that into my memory. Anyway, this is where you would set your times and set your dates. Language, if you're speaking English, you set it to English. You can go in here and change it to any other language as well. Now, 2, we've got video system is set to NTSC. That's for here. If you're in another country and you set it to PAL, you would be able to do that. Movie guide is currently enabled, so I leave that on. Feature guide, I don't like the feature guide, but it really doesn't bother me because it doesn't come on like the more amateur cameras, so you could leave it enabled. Beep is enabled. You heard that beep earlier when I was in single focus. The volume, we can go in here and set different volume settings. You got your shutter volume, your focus beep, your touch sounds, your, what's that say? Self-timer volume, and then your beep per photo taken. all of this, you can change the different settings. I want to hear if I can change it. Let's see. Focus speed. Woo. You can change the setting there. Touch sound. Oh, 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 oh. We'll leave that off. But yeah, you get the point. You can change your settings there. And then power savings. We have some power savings. Most of this stuff is disabled because I'm showing you this and we didn't want the camera going to sleep, but you can change the power settings right here. This is where you would go ahead and do that. Moving to number 3, under the wrench menu, we've got screen and viewfinder display is set to auto right now. So yeah, that's meaning when it shows you when the display is flipped out, it's going to be on the screen only and you can't use the viewfinder. If it's on the auto switching, this means if your screen is flipped out, you can use the LCD screen, and if you put your eye back up to the camera, it will then switch back to the proximity sensor and the EVF. So I leave this set to auto at all times because I want it to switch back and forth. We've got screen brightness is set to 3, which is right in, we have it set to 3, but that's for video purposes, for us filming. It's generally going to be set to 4, which is right in the middle. You don't want to have it too dark or you don't want to have it too bright. You want to leave it generally right in the middle because we don't want misrepresentation of our exposure. Same thing with viewfinder brightness. I leave this on auto. It's going to give us the best representation if you're shooting in manual, that the exposure is correct. The last thing you want to do is be shooting in manual and have it set to super bright that you're off by a couple of stops. You don't want to do that at all. Fine-tune viewfinder color correction or color tone, I don't touch that at all. UI magnification is disabled. If you have hard time seeing, you could enable this to magnify the user interface. And then you've got HDMI resolution, doesn't matter for what you're doing at all. Number 5, we've got touch control is currently set to standard, sensitive or disabled. That's where you would turn off it. It's set to standard right now, and choose USB connection app. We don't need to worry about that. Number 5, reset camera. We're not resetting it because we just set everything. Battery information, it's showing me that I have a remaining capacity. It's full, and it's showing me that the recharge performance is currently maximum. It's a new battery. Over time, batteries degrade. The more you charge them, the more you use them, they degrade, and so you're going to lose battery power. So just know when this gets down to the last tick mark, just think that's like 30%, and when it starts blinking red at you, you know your camera's about to die. You could charge it via USB-C, so you could put a power charger in here, like one of the ones that you use for your phone, or you could just charge the battery with a charger as well. You've got copyright information. This is where you would go to put your name in there. I put my name in as soon as I get the camera. Jared Polin, Frono's Photo, same thing, enter copyright details, and I want it to be saved in my RAWs as well as my JPEGs. Manuals, softwares, URL. This is going to give you a URL or a QR code to read the user manual if your camera doesn't come with it anymore or you lose it. But this is basically your user manual. It's much better. Certification logo display doesn't matter at all. That's just for certification information. And then firmware is 1.0.0. It's the newest firmware when I got the camera, but sometimes they update the firmware, and this is where you would go to upgrade to the latest firmware for your camera. And that takes us through the wrench menu. Moving on, only 2 more menus left. These are much shorter. We've got the custom setting menu, which we call the orange menu. First thing you see here is ISO expansion. This is something that you can enable or disabled. Obviously it comes disabled, but this allows you to take it beyond 6400 or take it all the way up to actually beyond 32,000 and take it up even further. You know what? Let's leave this off. There's really no reason to go behind that. If you need to shoot in such a dark situation where you have to raise the ISO that much, you probably shouldn't be shooting because it's way too dark. Then you also have safety shift, which I also leave off. Number 2, custom buttons. Now you might thought this was going to be a short menu, which it is, but you have a deeper menu inside of here with customized buttons. This is where you can tell the camera or change a different setting. Like, if I don't want the ISO button, which I do like the ISO button where it is, if I don't want it to be ISO, I can click in here and change it to any of these settings. This is tremendous. Having all of this ability to make changes, you could turn it off. That button does nothing, but that would make absolutely no sense. But what I don't like is there's some buttons on here, like this button, where I only have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 options. I don't like that I only have 5 options. So I just leave them where they are. I wish I could change these back 2 buttons to what I want them to be, but they do not allow you to do that. This is pretty self-explanatory. You could change what any of these buttons do, And on the left, you can see that it's for cameras, for stills. And on the right, you can see the camera for video. So that's a video camera. That's going to be different when you're in the different modes. So if we're in shooting modes for stills, it's only going to affect, the left is going to be in effect. And if you're in video mode in the top dial, the right is going to be in effect. You also have customized control ring. So this is going to be the outside control ring. I could go ahead and make a change. I could select it to be aperture. I could have it be shutter speed, ISO, so many different options. It's amazing that a basic camera like this retains some pro functionality. So good on Canon for doing that. Back into the menus, we can clear custom settings, which we're not going to do if you made changes because you want to leave them where they are. Release shutter without lenses. This is currently set to off. I do not want to do this. There is one rare instance where somebody would do this, and it's generally someone who wants to shoot a wedding ring or something, and they don't have a macro lens, so they want to take their regular lens off, turn it backwards. I've seen someone do this and shoot through it the wrong way, and it kind of acts like macro. It's not something you're really going to do, so I go ahead and leave that off. Retract lenses on power off. If you're using a powered zoom lens or a lens that auto retracts or has that information, you can leave this on because it's going to auto retract it for you. Number 4, we've got clear all custom functions. We're not going to do that because we just set everything the way we wanted to set it. The last menu here is called the My Menu, and this is where you put something that you can't quickly get to on the back of the camera or in quick menu. Honestly, you can basically get to everything super quick these days, but here's how you do it. We want to add a menu tab. We're going to go ahead, hit OK, add menu tab. We're going to hit configure. We're going to select an item to register, and we're going to select something. So let's say I want anti-flicker shooting, which I really don't need because it's already in the queue menu, but I'm going to add it, and I add it to my list. And now let's add metering mode, and I add it to my list. And I'm going to go ahead and go back one more, and you can see that both of them are right here. So if there's something that you use often that isn't easy to get to, you can put it on right here. And same thing, you could add a second tab for putting whatever you want in there. This was more important years ago. Now with so many functions being dedicated to buttons or a queue menu, there's really nothing else you need to add there, and that is personal preference. So again, that is a long menu. We went through the entire menu. The next thing we're going to do is run through the quick menus and the things that you're going to see on your screen and explain what they are and how you make changes without going into the menu. Now that we finished the menu for stills, let's jump into the menu for video. The good news in the video menu is that a lot of the settings are going to be exactly the same for stills, so we don't have to go through extensively every single menu here. So we've got shooting mode is set to video. As you can see, there's a lot of different options here. You've got movie auto exposure. You've got movie manual exposure. I kind of like shooting in this one and leaving it on auto ISO so that the camera is going to correct for the lighting situations that I'm in, but I can still take control with manual. So all these other options, they're all listed here. I really stick either to auto exposure or me taking control of it altogether. Movie for close-up demos. I guess if you're someone who's doing makeup tutorials, this is going to tell the camera that when you're shooting video, that if you hold something up in front of it, it's going to focus on it and then shift back to your face. So look, that's a good mode that they have in here if that's something that you're going to end up doing. Let me jump back in here and say, are you looking for more free videos? I've created over 3,000 fun and informative videos right here on YouTube, so please be sure to subscribe. If you want things like 3 shots or less, learning how to use your aperture, shutter speed, ISO, I have videos on just about everything, so please be sure to dive into the FroCives. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, gives us thumbs up, leave us some comments down below, but also every week I'm putting out new videos. We've got Photo News Fix, which gives you the update on 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 news stories each and every week. And also there's reviews, there's previews, and there's other fun and informative content. Now, let's get back to the video. Let's get back into the menu here. We've got movie record size. Remember earlier I showed you when you were in the photo menu, you only had like 5 different options when it came to selecting your frame rate. Now we've got all of the options selected. You can start it, you could do 4K at 30 frames, 4K light, I generally like the standard IPB. That's going to be the highest quality that you could do here. When you're shooting, it's going to be the most data. You could also see the total record time based off of the memory card that I have in there is 1 hour, 5 minutes, and 45 seconds. So this 4K 23.98 frames per second is basically the 24 frames a second mode. That's going to be very reminiscent of a movie. It's more cinematic, whereas 30 frames a second isn't as cinematic. And then we've got 60 somewhere. Yep, we got 60 frames. That's more like what you see on TV or video games. It's even faster. That's very similar to what you would see when you're watching live TV or video games. So you have to decide where you want this to set. Generally speaking, I'm going to be 4K IPB right here. That's going to give me some of the best quality possible for what I'm looking for. High frame rate. So if we want to shoot at 120 frames per second, we have to go in here and hit enable. But understand that audio is not recorded in high frame rate movies, so you will not have audio. You go in here, you enable this to give you the 120 frames per second option. Digital zoom off, let's see, not available with movie record size other than full HD. So yeah, we don't want to do digital zoom at all. Sound recording is set to auto. In here, you've got your auto mode. You can go to manual. You could turn it off totally if you're in some secret meeting and you don't want audio recorded and they're like, are you recording this? Are you a narc? If you're a narc, you better not be. No, I just have a camera to record you. I'm no narc. Do I look like a narc to you, Steven?
Yes.
I look like a narc? I could pass for a high school student. Hi, I'm a high school student. Look at me. Anyway, you could set it to manual. You could set it to auto. If you know what you're doing, you're going to take control of it in manual. You also have your wind filter is set to auto. If you're not anywhere near wind, I turn this off. It's going to compress it more when you have it on. I do not like the wind reduction personally. Then we've got menu number 2, exposure compensation, ISO settings. We already set all of these. And then other than that, this is basically everything. But we got auto slow shutter for video. So that is currently on. That's going to allow you to automatically record brighter movies when dark. So you can go to an even slower shutter speed. Number 3 menu. Remember what I said about white balance? That's going to be locked in here. You've got your picture style is going to be locked in here. If you make your clarity way too clear, that's going to be locked in there. You're not going to be able to change that and do any corrections after the fact. So make sure you get this one right as much as possible. Image stabilization mode for video is currently set to IS is on, meaning if you have a lens that is image stabilization, it's on. Digital IS is off. That's going to, remember, that's going to crop into your frame ever so slightly, but it's going to help give you the idea that you have image stabilization when you're moving. Custom quick controls for video, you could change those here as well. Auto levels for video is currently disabled. And everything else, yep, we're all the same at this point. Going into the magenta mode, that is magenta. The AF, you got movie servo AF is currently enabled. AF area autofocus, same thing. Subject detection is on people. You could change this if you're photographing birds or planes or trains or automobiles. Eye detection is enabled, which is so tremendous if you're walking and talking or videoing someone who is walking and talking. And then focus mode is set to autofocus. Everything else is going to be exactly the same as it is for when you're shooting stills. So that is your video menu. And now let's move into what you're going to see on the displays when you're on the outside of the camera, outside of the menu. So now what we're seeing is what you're going to see if you use your LCD screen primarily, or if you're using the electronic viewfinder. Now remember, I'm plugged into the camera, so it might be slightly different, but I want to walk you around the quick menu in a second, but also what the icons and things are that you're seeing in your camera or on the display. In the top left, it says M, because we're set to manual. If we were in any other mode, it would show you exactly what mode you are in right there. Moving over to the right of that, we see 1240. That's how many shots I have left. Remember, I'm set to RAW and JPEG full. If we were just to be set to JPEG, I'd probably have 9,999 plus photos that I would take because RAW files take up more space. You see that orange number 6? That is the buffer size. That's not a lot of shots that you're gonna get. You're gonna get 6 in the buffer set to RAW and set to JPEG. Why don't I just change it? This is where I'm gonna use the Q menu. It's real easy. I don't have to go into the other menus because I have all of these options right here. Right here, we have choose image size, and I wanna do that quickly. I'm gonna go ahead and in info because I wanna turn off RAW. Now I turn off RAW, and what's it show? 5,316 images. So let me hit OK. Let me hit Q menu one more time so we're taken out of it. Now next to manual, you can see 5,316 images, and the buffer is now 17. You're not going to outrun this buffer, I don't think. I didn't outrun it earlier. Just holding my finger down, I could totally shoot a lot of shots. But now you can see that the buffer has more space in it. To the right of that, you've got 1 hour showing. That's how much video record time we would have on the card. Remember, as you take more pictures, the time for video is going to go down because your card's getting more full. To the right of that, you've got your indicator for your battery. So you're going to see how much battery. Right now it's on full. To the right of that on the screen, you see something that looks like a thermometer. It's telling me that because I've had this camera on now for close to 2.5 hours, that it might be getting heated a little bit. And not heated in the way that it wants to take me back home and sleep with me, but heated in the way that it might overheat. You won't really have problems with these cameras overheating, but from time to time, if you're shooting in a super hot environment or your hands wrapped around it for a long time, you will get a little warning that's going to tell you that the camera might be overheating. So just heed that. You might turn it off for a little bit or not keep it in the direct sunlight, but that's what that is. Right-hand side of the screen, all the way at the bottom, my ISO is set to, what is that? How many zeros? 1, 2, wow, it's set to 10,000 ISO right now. Right above there, it's showing me that we're at 18 millimeters. As I zoom in, remember we turned this on to show me what focal length I'm on. I like having that because I like seeing that, oh, I might be at 45 or I want to be at 35, so I'm at 35. So it's nice that you have that indicator there to show you your millimeters. You have your meter, your light meter, which I showed you earlier on the bottom of the screen in the middle. To the left of that, you see 5.6. That's your aperture. And to the left of that, you've got 1/30th of a second, which is your shutter speed. Now, do you see that orange dial with a top swoosh on it, kind of rainbowy, not rainbow color, but orange? That's telling me that if I turn this top dial, you can see the shutter speed is changing. The faster it goes, the less light it's going to let in because it's a quicker shutter speed. So you want to use faster shutter speeds when you're shooting objects that are moving and slower for non-moving subjects. But how do we change the aperture? Because there is no dedicated dial for changing the aperture. Well, I showed you earlier that we press this up button and you see that the arrow, the orange swoosh, moved. Now I can turn that to the right and it's going to F11, F14, F16, and back down to the left, back down to F4, which is where it's going to be when I'm at 18 millimeters. But as I zoom in, it's going to change because this is a variable aperture lens. If your lens is a 4 to a 6.3, as you zoom, it's automatically going to change no matter what you do. If you have a fixed aperture lens, like a 24 to 70 2.8, at 24 it's 2.8, at 70 it's 2.8, so it's not going to change as you zoom because it's called it's not a variable aperture lens. It's fixed aperture at 2.8. That takes us around the screen display right here, but let's go back into the Q menu because you're going to see all your different options. You don't have to go into the menu to change everything. We've got changing your autofocus settings. You could do that here. Changing your servo. Do you want to shoot one shot? You could change that right here just by arrowing over to one shot. When you scroll down, subject detection. That could be auto, people, animals, cars, or off. You see how easy it is to get to everything? I already showed you can change image quality. When we go down, metering, another thing we don't end up changing. Over to the right-hand side, this is taking us back out of this menu, quick menu. Flickering, it's on. If we want it off, we can just move it to off by hitting the arrow or touching the screen. Auto white balance, your picture style, and then you've got your creative filters. And as I showed you in the menu system, you could turn off things in the quick menu that you'll never use. You can customize the quick menu to move things that you want to get to quicker. Or if there's nothing there that you want, you could put it into your My menu, just like we said. This is really simple, really easy, and you don't need to dive deep into menus anymore because everything is right on the screen. Now let me show you your display when you're in video mode. So we're going to go from manual over to video. We're going to get this off the screen by pressing the shutter button halfway down, and now you can see what is showing up on the screen. Top left-hand corner, you've got the icon for video, so that shows you what mode we're in. Then next to that, to the right, you've got your 1 hour of record time. To the right of there, you have your battery indicator. Then, this is an interesting one more in the middle. You can see that it looks like the back of a camera, and it has an arrow pointing up. That's because we are shooting in horizontal mode. But if I was to switch to vertical mode, you can see that it's switching which way it's going to indicate. To the right, you can see that overheating indicator now has two notches on it. The reason is we are sending out a signal. It's getting extra hot because we've been going for 2.5 hours. Bottom right-hand corner, you can see right there that you have your 18 millimeters, and on the bottom left-hand corner, it's showing you that servo autofocus is activated. So that means that it's going to have the continual autofocus as see how it's continually focusing? As I move and I focus on something, it's changing focus. Now, what happens if we want to record video? Actually, let me hit the shutter button halfway down. Now that's showing me I'm at 1/25 of a second at 3.5, and then we are in auto ISO currently. But what happens when we shoot video? Well, I'm gonna go ahead and press the record button, and we are now recording. You can see record is showing up in the right-hand side. A red frame is showing up that it lets us know we're recording, and it's counting up. You have continuous recording here, so it's just gonna keep going and going as long as you have the ability to save the stuff on your card because you have enough space and you don't run out of battery. But if you're gonna be doing long recordings with video, you might as well plug into a USB-C charger. One thing that you could use your phone charger, and it should keep it going for a long amount of time. So to stop recording, we go ahead and hit the red button once again. And let's put the cap back on, go into the Q menu here, which shouldn't be much different for this mode. Q menu, there's a couple of different things, but you can see you've got your choose a shooting mode, you've got your focusing mode again, subject detection once again, movie recording size if you need to change it. You've got a hand that's waving at you. This is where you would change your IS, set your image stabilization. Right now we've got active image stabilization. That's your get out of the menu, auto white balance, picture style, creative filters are not active, and digital zoom is not active in the mode that we're in. Much easier, everything is up on the screen. Like I said, all of this stuff is on the screen and within a few button clicks or just attached to one of the buttons on the camera. So you really don't have to go into the menu as often. Woo! It's a long video, I get it. But this is something that I give you so that you can get a jump start with your photography and not struggle when you pick up your camera and not understand what the settings are. Now, of course, I can't go into everything, or this would be like a 5-hour long video, but I've got thousands of other videos on my channel, so please be sure to subscribe. If you got this far, put a hashtag down below that says, hey, hashtag, I got this far. Or just hashtag I got this far, just so that I know that you watched it. If you have any questions, I may not be able to get to them because these videos live on for a long time, but please watch the videos as we put them out because there's a lot of information for learning, there's a lot of fun and informative stuff, and I really appreciate you guys taking the time to watch this, and I thank you very much for watching. Jared, PolinFroKnowsPhoto.com. See ya.